This season has sincerely been one of my favorites in recent history, which is really saying something because the last 2 seasons had been incredible also. Like really, this whole year has just been fantastic when it comes to the quantity of quality anime being released. Side tangent aside, horror anime isn't something I've seen a lot of in recent years. Well, at least done well enough for me to pay any attention to it. Which is a real shame because the horror genre was honestly one of my favorites when I first got into anime. I love staying up late and watching shows like Higurashi, Another, and Clanad. So when this season came out and I saw that 2 popular shows in it had the horror tag, I was quite the happy camper. By the way, we won't be talking about this show today because, well, this show just needs an entire video to itself. Instead, we'll be talking about the more popular out of the 2, Angels of Death. Now, is Angels of Death a scary anime? Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. It's not. But Angels of Death is absolutely an enjoyable anime, falling more so in the another category of horror, where it's so ridiculous and over the top that it's almost funny. And that's one of the main features of this show that I really appreciate. It's willing to commit to this ridiculously radical world they've created and not take any cheap ways out. A lot of shows in general ruin their immersion this way, by making constant jokes at how ridiculous some of the rules of their world is, or bringing in other ex machina-like features that were never explained. Angels of Death immediately understands what its audience wants from it, and delivers. The show, despite being a ridiculous edgelord fest, takes itself incredibly seriously, allowing us, the viewers, to get invested in characters we probably otherwise wouldn't be able to take seriously. All the voice acting is handled this way as well. I know voice acting is generally not something I ever really talk about, but it's clear that each of the people playing the characters take their roles extremely seriously, and what we end up getting are some believable characters, which is incredibly impressive considering the circumstances. The immersion is further intensified through the aesthetic appeal of the show. Originally, the show runs this scary, rusty aesthetic that I heavily enjoyed, but as most shows that do this, I expected it to slowly be forgotten about as the plot thickened. But this doesn't happen in Angels of Death. As the show continues to progress, the aesthetic style is explored even further, making for some incredibly gorgeous and almost terrifying scenes. Perhaps one of my favorite scenes is with the priest as he traps Rachel on his floor with the smoke. We enter into her mind as she tries to escape, and we are shown this brilliant yet terrifying world she must escape. It's not only one of the most gorgeous scenes in the anime, it's also one of the most terrifying, because we can finally begin to infer what brought Rachel here, as well as what some of her darkest fears are. This is all told through a barrage of visuals that have been heavily influenced by the aesthetic style of the show, leading me finally to each of the characters. In total, there are 6 floors Rachel must climb through and survive to hopefully escape. Each of these floors has its own boss, so to speak, that runs the floor and, more or less, attempts to kill our protagonists in their own way. Also, I should mention that each floor is stylized in a way that represents each of the floor's bosses. Dr. Daniels is, well, a doctor, thus his floor is modeled after a hospital, while characters like Catherine, who is a prison warden, has her floor modeled after a prison facility. Each of the characters have a simple method of escape from their floors. For instance, the first floor's boss, Zach, also notable because he is the guy who ends up joining Rachel in an attempt to escape, is a simple-minded and straightforward guy. He leaves his elevator to the next level completely open, and even has a sign pointing directly to where it is. Although, I guess technically he couldn't really tell. Whereas characters like Catherine, who is an over-the-top psychopath, requires them to solve relatively simplistic puzzles. The catch to these puzzles is that they play off of messing with the character's state of mind. Thus, the only way to defeat her is by finding her weaknesses and exploiting it to get access to the next floor. Which, may I say, is equally ridiculous. I also enjoy the mentality that each of the characters have towards killing. They all have set rules on how they kill. Dr. Danny merely wants Rachel's eyes, whereas Zach only loves killing people who are showing emotions. Of course, the main character is a deadpan lol. He doesn't show any emotions, which explains why he has no bloodlust for, thus they can work together, I guess. Whatever floats their boat. Nevertheless, this leads to some pretty unexpected situations. For instance, the fight against Edward Mason, the boss of the 3rd floor. Edward only kills people who ask him to do so. So when Rachel refuses to let Edward kill him, since she has promised herself off to Zach, he reacts as though he is betrayed, since he has found someone who wants to die. Oh yeah, by the way, Rachel wants to die. But won't let him give her a beautiful death. All of the characters share these traits, which makes for a somewhat formulaic narrative, but also grounds the world the show has been built into. There are clearly rules to this world, and everyone seems to be following them. When Zach abandons the 1st floor and chases Rachel to the 2nd floor, it's made extremely clear that this is a super rare case, and something that all of the floor bosses look down on. The characters, the rules of the world, the aesthetic style, and the extreme commitment to telling their narrative seriously led Angels of Death to be one of my favorite shows of the season. Despite it feeling incredibly cheesy at times, the show is immersive and the story demands your attention, which is way more than I can say for most shows. And although I am doubtful that the show will end spectacularly, I can at the very least say that I've enjoyed the ride. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe because I post videos weekly talking about different anime that I'm watching or just talking about anime that I love. A huge thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are my Zachs, my gods. Speaking of which, if you're interested in seeing how I edit, chatting with me, or simply supporting the channel, I run a $1 a month Patreon to make that as easy as possible. Make sure you guys share, like, comment, and subscribe. This is Manime Matt. Make sure you guys say, man, go watch that goddamn anime.